We are taught that civilization began 5,000 years ago. Sumer, Egypt, Indus Valley, tablets, temples, kings and wars. But beneath the history we write, there is another story, one carved in myth, etched in stone, and whispered through bloodlines we've forgotten. The story of civilizations before civilization. Atlantis, Lemuria, Mu. Names dismissed as fantasy by the modern mind, yet echoed by ancient traditions across every ocean, every continent. Plato told of Atlantis not as metaphor, but as memory passed down from Egyptian priests, a society advanced not only in technology, but in consciousness. Lemuria appears in the oral histories of Polynesia, in Tamil scriptures, in Tibetan lore, a civilization of deep unity, resonant living, and empathic language. And then, they vanished. Not just physically, not only beneath waves or shifting tectonics, but vibrationally, as if their very frequency collapsed, and with it, the coherence that held their world together. But here's the part we were never told. They may have disappeared from the surface, but they didn't leave. They encoded what they knew, not in books, not in monuments, but in resonance, in memory, in field, in you. Because this isn't about lost cities, it's about lost coherence, and the quiet return of what we once were, and may yet be again. If that opening stirred something wordless in you, comment, I feel the echo, because the echo is the entrance. Atlantis, a word that pulses with mystery. To the rational mind, it's myth. To the intuitive, it's memory. Plato wrote of it 2,400 years ago, an island empire beyond the pillars of Heracles, vast in power, rich in wisdom, lost in a single night of cataclysm. He wasn't guessing. He was quoting Solon, who learned it from Egyptian priests, who said it was ancient even then. But what made Atlantis extraordinary wasn't its wealth, it was its resonance. They built with sound, not tools. They encoded frequency into form. Their architecture wasn't aesthetic, it was harmonic. Pyramids, crystals, rings of land and sea, not decoration. Design, based on celestial mechanics, earth grid lines, and sacred proportion. They understood energy not as something to extract but to align with. And more than their cities, it was their consciousness that set them apart. They lived in coherence. Telepathy wasn't magic. It was the byproduct of inner silence. Intention wasn't abstract. It shaped matter. They didn't govern through law but through vibrational consensus. But something shifted. Power began to outrun presence. Mind eclipsed heart. Technology advanced, but integrity fractured. And when that frequency dropped, so did the city. Not just into the sea, but out of phase. Atlantis wasn't destroyed. It detuned. And that detuning echoes in us today. In the ache, in the longing, in the strange, inexplicable memory that you've been part of something that no one talks about, but you can't forget. If this part brought Atlantis closer than legend, comment, I remember the pattern, because it's not about the city, it's about the code. Lemuria was not a place you walked through, it was a state you lived in. Its memory doesn't return as structure, but as sensation. Soft, fast, connected. Long before words, long before geometry, there was resonance. Lemurians didn't speak, they felt. Their language wasn't sound, it was tone. Their communication wasn't mental, it was empathic. They didn't build cities, they grew them. Structures emerged organically, in harmony with the land, using frequency, intention, and biological resonance. They knew the earth as alive, they felt her pulse. Their technology wasn't separate from nature, it was an extension of it. And most radically, they remembered who they were, not as individuals, but as field, each being a unique expression of one vast intelligence, separate only in form, never in essence. They held no war, no hierarchy, because coherence didn't allow it. But then came the shift. The planet's frequency dropped, the veil thickened, individuality, once an expression, became isolation. And Lemuria faded, not by flood, but by forgetfulness. They didn't die, they dephased. Their wisdom didn't vanish, it became subtle, accessible only through vibration. And now it's rising again, in dreams, in music, in the moments when silence feels like home. If this part made you feel more than understand, comment, I feel the hum. Because Lemuria doesn't speak in memory, but in frequency. We search for Atlantis beneath the waves. We scan the ocean floor for sunken cities. We measure tectonic shifts, hoping for ruins. But what if the evidence we seek isn't in rock or relic, but in resonance? What if these civilizations didn't vanish? They simply shifted frequency. We assume the ancients built like we do, with tools, with labor, with matter. But what if their structures were vibrational, built from intention, tone, light? What if their temples sang? What if their archives were geometric fields, not scrolls, not scripts? Modern science dismisses this, but ancient memory persists. Every major tradition speaks of a great forgetting, a veil that descended, a time when we lost the bridge between worlds. And in that forgetting, matter thickened. The body dulled. The world lost its glow, not because the past collapsed, but because our ability to perceive it dimmed. The ruins didn't disappear. Our eyes did. But now, something's changing. You see it in the rise of energy medicine, in the rediscovery of sacred geometry, in the strange dreams, in the intuitive children, in the longing you can't explain. We are not waiting for the lost world to surface. We are rising to meet it, through frequency. If this part resonated more than it explained, comment, "I'm tuning in," because maybe the evidence isn't buried, it's remembered. We build with force. They built with harmony. Today, architecture is about material, but for the ancients, it was about alignment. Every structure was a song, every temple a tuning fork, every shape a transmitter. Sacred geometry wasn't symbolic, it was functional. The golden ratio wasn't an artistic flourish, it was a key to resonance, to stability, to coherence. They understood that shape holds frequency, that sound arranges matter, that consciousness can anchor itself into form, if the form is right. In Atlantis, it is said, they built with quartz and crystal, not as decoration, but as memory holders, resonant libraries. In Lemuria, structures were grown, biologically tuned to the land. Their walls vibrated with intention. No need for light bulbs. They used biophotonic emission. Even today, we see echoes, chants that heal, tones that balance the nervous system, frequencies that influence DNA. Modern somatics shows sound creating geometry in water. Fibonacci spirals appear in nature, in your ear, your fingerprint, your lungs. You are built on sacred geometry because you are resonance in form. And maybe, so were they. Not just their buildings, their minds, their hearts, their civilizations. They didn't conquer nature. They entered into dialogue with it. And perhaps that's why they left so little behind, because they didn't need monuments. They became the message. If this part gave you chills where words didn't reach, comment, "I feel the pattern," because you don't need to see the structures to resonate with their memory. No civilization falls in a day. It begins in the field, in the vibration. First, there is resonance, then distortion. The stories tell of floods, earthquakes, fires, but those were symptoms, not the cause. The real fall began when coherence was lost. In Atlantis, knowledge grew faster than wisdom. Technology advanced, but intention fractured. They manipulated energy not with reverence, but with control. They amplified the mind and abandoned the heart. And when the frequency split, so did the world. Some say it ended in cataclysm. Others say it phased out, slipping into another layer of time. In Lemuria, the fall was quieter, not destruction, dissolution. As Earth's frequency changed, their unified field destabilized, connection unraveled, individuality hardened into ego, empathy dulled into survival. They didn't fight, they faded. And now you feel their echo, the anxiety that doesn't match your life, the grief that seems older than your years, the deep, wordless homesickness for something you've never seen, but always carried, because maybe you were there, and maybe you chose to fall, to forget, to experience separation, to play this long, slow game of returning to yourself, and now that return has begun. If this part cracks something ancient open, comment, "I return through remembering," because you didn't lose the wisdom, you buried it in yourself. The fall wasn't forever, because wisdom leaves echoes, and echoes don't forget. You see it in science. Quantum physics now confirms what mystics once whispered, that matter is vibration, that observation shapes outcome, that everything is connected by invisible field. You see it in medicine, energy healing, somatic therapy, neuroplasticity. The nervous system is no longer a machine. It's a memory field. You see it in geometry, crop circles repeating Atlantean ratios, architects rediscovering sacred proportions, DNA spiraling in golden ratio, and you see it in yourself, in the way you breathe when you're near the ocean, in your fascination with crystals, though no one taught you, in how your body reacts to old symbols, your longing for stillness, your distrust of noise. It's not nostalgia, it's resonance. You're not seeking something new, you're seeking coherence. The world around you is shifting, fast, loud, chaotic. But under that noise is a quiet invitation to tune back in, to remember who you were and why you came back. Because memory doesn't return as information, it returns as feeling, a chill, a pull, a yes, I know this. If this part made your bones nod, comment. I remember without knowing why. Because sometimes the truth doesn't need proof, only resonance. Why do you feel pulled to something no one else sees? Why do ancient names stir something in you that textbooks never taught? Why does sacred geometry feel familiar? Why does silence sometimes feel like home? It's not random, because the ones waking up now are the same ones who fell. Not by bloodline, not by history, by frequency. You don't remember with your mind. You remember with your field. The ache for a different world, that's not fantasy. That's memory rising. You were there when coherence collapsed. You felt the field break. You watched the light dim, and part of you chose to return. Now, in this body, in this time, not to repeat the past, but to rewrite the timeline. You are the re-entry, the node of remembrance. That's why you feel out of place, too deep, too sensitive, too old for your age, because you didn't come to fit in. You came to reactivate. The codes you carry aren't in books. They're in your tears, your instincts, your refusal to settle for what's offered. You are not waking up for the first time. You are waking up again. And this time, you won't fall asleep. If this part made something silent in you finally speak, comment. I return to restore, because maybe you didn't just inherit the story. You came to finish it. Remembering is not the end. It's the beginning. Because memory, by itself, is a mirror. But applied memory is creation. The Atlanteans mastered form. The Lemurians mastered feeling. But both fell. Not because they lacked power, but because they forgot balance. We are not here to repeat them. We are here to complete them, to merge what they separated, head and heart, precision and presence, structure and soul. This is the birth of a new resonance, one that remembers technology but roots it in ethics, one that values science but doesn't abandon spirit, one that speaks the language of light without forgetting the dark. And it begins with the inner field. Because civilization doesn't start in cities, it starts in the nervous system. Every time you choose coherence over control, every time you ground instead of react, every time you breathe instead of broadcast, you tune the grid. You alter the collective field. You build, not in stone, but in state. Because the future will not be enforced, it will be felt. And those who can hold coherence in the storm of distraction, they are the architects of what comes next. If this part felt less like advice and more like instruction, comment. I build in resonance, because the new world isn't a place, it's a vibration. Ancient wisdom is not trapped in stone, it's moving through your biology. Your breath is technology, your nervous system is a tuning device, your body is geometry made flesh. And everything you feel, everything you embody, feeds the field. This is not metaphor, this is instruction. When you regulate your emotion, you regulate the timeline. When you ground your energy, you anchor coherence into the grid. Your choices matter, not just for your life, for the collective pattern. Every time you choose presence over panic, you shift the resonance of your space. Every moment you hold love without demand, you transmit what Lemuria once lived. When you act with clarity and alignment, you hold the integrity Atlantis once lost. And you don't need to teach it, you just need to be it. Because frequency is viral. Your field broadcasts louder than your voice. That's why you're here, not to convert, to cohere. You came back not to escape the world, but to remember just enough to rebuild it. One breath, one body, one decision at a time. If this part made your path feel clearer, comment, I embody the memory, because the wisdom of the ancients was never in the sky. It was always waiting in your spine. What if Earth was never isolated? What if the wisdom of Lemuria and Atlantis wasn't just terrestrial, but stellar? Across the ancient world, civilizations pointed upward. They aligned their temples to Sirius, Orion, the Pleiades. They mapped the heavens before telescopes. They spoke of gods who came from the stars, but not in myths, in memory. The Dogon tribe knew of Sirius B, an invisible star discovered only recently. The Hopi told of star brothers who would return. The Sumerians wrote of beings called the Anunnaki. The Egyptians said their pharaohs came from Orion. Different names, same pattern. Our ancestors didn't see the stars as symbols. They saw them as home. Because Lemuria and Atlantis may not have been the beginning, they may have been the middle. Colonies of light, bridges between dimensions, places where stellar intelligence met terrestrial matter. And when those bridges fell, we weren't just cut off from memory. We were cut off from contact. But the silence didn't last. Today you feel it again, that whisper. In your dreams, in geometry you can't explain, in your inexplicable draw to the sky. It's not curiosity, it's reconnection. You are not alone in this remembering. You never were, because the stars are not distant, they are entangled. And when you raise your frequency, they respond. You are not waiting for them to arrive. You are becoming coherent enough to hear them again. If this part made you feel both very small and very, very old, comment, I remember the sky inside me, because maybe the return of the ancients comes through us and to us. So what remains? After Atlantis fell, after Lemuria faded, after the temples disappeared into water and memory, what's left? You. You are what remains, because civilizations do not end. They echo, they imprint, and when the world is ready, they return, not in stone, but in souls. You didn't just read about Lemuria. You've been hearing its tone your entire life. You didn't just wonder about Atlantis. You felt its architecture in your bones. You don't need to prove they existed. You are their proof. You carry the memory in your nervous system. You carry the coherence in your field. And now, you carry the choice to rebuild, not what was, but what can be. Not temples of quartz, but fields of resonance. Not ancient hierarchies, but living networks of coherence, humility, and presence. Not stories of the past, but futures remembered before they arrive. Because the great civilizations didn't disappear, they fractured and became us. And now we gather, not to worship the past, to restore the pattern, not to look back, to tune forward. You are the bridge. You are the recall. You are the resonance rising. If you felt this story inside your chest, not just your head, comment, I carry the ancient forward, because the time of forgetting is closing, and the time of becoming has begun.